All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Tiffy. I am your instructor for this evening. I know we got about an hour together. I know I was waiting on a few other people, so if other people come in, we'll get them caught up. I have been an AP US history teacher. I know you guys all have the test tomorrow, so good luck. I have been an AP US history teacher for 16 years. I have been an A-push teacher for 10 years, and I've actually been a grader. This is going to be my third year grading the AP US history exam. So it'll be my third year grading for the College Board. So what I plan on doing tonight is going over a different section of the DBQ. There are 3 different tests that they can give you. Tonight we're going to go over continuity and change question, and so we'll do that here in a moment. A few housekeeping items. Number 1, at the bottom of your Zoom, you guys are all probably professionals at this by now. If you have a question, please use the reactions and just raise your hand just like that. If I'll ask a lot of questions as far as, do you understand? Is everyone with me? Give me a thumbs up just like that if you understand everything that I am talking about at that moment. If you are shy and don't want to talk to me face to face using video, go ahead, use that chat bar to your right. Type in your question and I will answer all of your questions as soon as they pop up or as we go through. And we can go on from there. Okay, so please don't hesitate. I'll answer every question that I can for you. At the very end here, I'll go over the different types of or the different periods that can be asked on tomorrow's test, and we can roll from there. All right. Again, ask any question. If you have a pen and paper, that'll probably help. If you'd rather use just your computer, I'm kind of take you through what I have my students do in my classroom so that they have an understanding of what's going on. Okay. And if you want to type the prompt and you want to talk about it or you want to paste it into the chat, I can go over that as well. Okay. So without further ado, let's start going through the A-push review. So I'm going to share my screen right here. Give me a moment. I'm a boomer. All right. Here we go. All right, so again, this is going to be, we're going to talk about the continuity and change question. So again, AP can give you 3 different types of questions or prompts. One is compare and contrast, which hopefully is pretty easy. We'll talk about how to set that up real quick here. So you have your intro. Let me stop there for a second. So every DBQ question that you answer should be 5 paragraphs. Matt, wait a second. There's only 45 minutes. As an AP grader, you have to understand that there are college professors that are grading these. There are high school professors or high school teachers that are grading these. Depending on who you get to read your paper, obviously you will never know. There is some format. Some people are a little more sticklers than others. Some are, here's what it is, and go ahead and grade it, right? So again, you want to push for those 5 different paragraphs. Your first paragraph is going to be your intro. Word about your intro. There are 2 places where you can put your thesis. Your thesis can go in the first paragraph, last sentence, or it can go in your last paragraph, first sentence. If it is not in one of those 2 places, it's considered out of bounds and you don't get credit. So even if you have a fantastic thesis that's in the first sentence of your 3rd paragraph, not working for us. Okay, so just be clear on that. Your thesis, again, for those that are scrambling to write this down, it's going to be in your last sentence in your first paragraph, or it can be found in your last paragraph, first sentence. In my method, I think that you should go ahead and include your thesis in both places in case you get a little bit of a reader that's tired, let's say, is amongst other things. Some of us get tired or whatnot. They may skip it in the first one and it's still there in the last paragraph. So just to make sure that you're covered to go from there. Okay, so there's that. The second type of writing is going to be a continuity and change, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. And then the last one is to what extent kind of question. So how true is it? If you are new to Wise Ant, on my last one earlier in the week, or excuse me, last week Wednesdays more specifically, I gave a talk using the to what extent type of question. So you can find that there. Okay. So how to succeed on the 2020 push DBQ. Excuse me. All right, new rules for the 2020 test. If you have been living under a rock or you have a teacher that hasn't been teaching you what's going on, and that's not to throw anyone under the bus, but certain people are getting to certain things, okay? But the new rules for the 2020 test are true for AP US History, it's true for European History, and it's true for World History. It will be a 45-minute test, and it will be 5 minutes to submit that test after the 45 minutes are over. A word of note, I also teach AP Human Geography, and my students who took it on Monday, if you also watch the Twitter world, there was a problem with submissions. If for some reason you don't submit it, they will kick you out to go ahead and retake the test in June. So that's not to frighten you, it's just to make sure that you're aware of what's going on. If that situation does arise, make sure you fill out the form at the end that said that you had a discrepancy. Otherwise, once you do hit submit, it's in. So again, 45 minutes you'll have for plan and to write your paper. And those 5 minutes, I would try to submit that paper as quick as possible, okay? There are 3 ways to submit your paper. You can literally hand write your paper and then go ahead and take pictures of it and upload it. 2, you can go ahead and write it on a Microsoft Word or other notes or other writing application that you have on your computer and then copy and paste. I recommend that. Just please don't hit the X if you're in the middle of your paper and all of a sudden it just kind of goes to craziness. The other one is you can directly type on AP's website and then hit submit. I'm sorry, excuse me, no, check that. The third one is you save it to your computer and upload it there, okay? So again, to rehash, just to make sure you can take a picture of it, you can copy and paste it, or you can save it to your computer and upload it. I think if you copy and paste, boom, you're done. You're on your way. Okay. Recommendations when you do take this test tomorrow are 2 of them. 1, you have the prompt open. I'm urging my students to print it off because then they can go through the documents really quickly and then write on that Microsoft Word. Word of note again. If you hit X on the actual prompt that you'll open up using your e-ticket or you hit refresh, it will automatically cancel out and you will be out altogether. So please, 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 for the love of whatever God you may be praying to, if you do, don't do that. Make sure that you have that open. Don't refresh until you've hit submit and you send everything away. Okay. So those are the 3 tests that AP can test you on. Okay. Test specifics. The test is on a 10-point rubric scale. Now, Mr. Tiffy or Matt, whatever you want to call me, I am not good at contextualization. That's okay. We're going to show you some strategies to get you connected with contextualization here. However, the other part of this is if you panic, go ahead and get as many points as you can, okay? I have a couple of students that I've been working with over the last couple of days through tutoring, through Wisant, and they have been, I tell them that AP graders, the average over the last few years has been a 1.65 to about a 1.75 on the DBQ. So if you can get 5 or 6 points on this, I'm gonna push you and show you a couple of strategies to get that 7 or 8. You are in good graces, I think, okay? So there's that. All right. So what is the test question you on? Number 1, it gives you 1 point for contextualization, 1 point for your thesis, which is like your roadmap if you're unfamiliar with that. 3 points for describe the documents, describe 4 documents and connect them to the thesis. 2 points for the HAP method. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Some people may refer to that as a HIP method, HIPP. I call it the HAP. HIP is fine. It's interchangeable. It's the same concept. And then 2 points for outside information, and we'll talk about that. And then 1 point, I call it the unicorn point, a complexity point. And this demonstrates complex understanding of the prompt and uses evidence to qualify or modify the argument. So how does your argument change a little bit? Or where does your argument go to? What is the next step for it? And you're going to hear me use a phrase called so what? And you'll understand a little bit more as we go through this, okay? Is everyone with me so far? Am I talking too much? Help me out. Give me a thumbs up if you're with me. All right, Emily says yes. Everyone else is a blank. All right, cool. Mina, thank you. All right. All right, we got a couple others. All right, so thank you very much for your participation. Here we go. All right, so what does a DBQ need? You need 5 paragraphs. I don't care what type of paragraph or what essay you're writing, you need 5 paragraphs, okay? Again, as I said, you have US history teachers at our high school, and then you also have college professors that are there at the same table that do have a little bit higher of an expectation if you want that college credit. Remember, you are getting college credit, and this is your resume. You're building it to go into college. All right, so the first one, intro, you have what I call the HOT method, H-O-T-T. We'll go through all this a little bit later. And that is going to be about 4 to 5 sentences. Your body paragraphs, you will need 3 body paragraphs. If you are panicking and you only get 2 of them, it's not going to hurt you, but we prefer to see 3. I'll just be honest with you and be upfront. Here you're going to use 5 to 6 sentences, and you're going to use the IDEA acronym, IDDEA, and we'll go through that again later on. My last paragraph is going to use the stops method. I'm sorry, that is a typo. I'm sorry. Body paragraph 4 is going to be 5 to 6 sentences, pardon me, and that's also going to be your IDEA. That should be your counter argument. So you're going to, whatever the prompt is, you can argue or you can agree or disagree, but then your last body paragraph should be in opposition to what your thesis says, and we'll cover that here in a minute. And then your last paragraph is going to be your stops method, and we'll talk about that as we go on. All right, so we're going to talk about the HAP method. Some people call it the HIP method. If you're familiar with HIP or HAP, can you please just give me a thumbs up just so I have an understanding, so I don't have to keep repeating myself 1,000 times. Mina's familiar. God, Karina is good. Okay, so the HIP method, excuse me. The HIP method stands for historical context, intended audience, purpose, or point of view. I call it the HAP because I'm a happy guy. All right, so HAP is historical context, audience, purpose, and point of view. And we'll talk about those in a minute. More specifically, but what they are doing is they're going, if I go back to my rubric, they are going back and they are getting that HAP method and giving you more detail towards your argument. So it allows us as readers to see if you can come up with a historical argument and see if there's sway in a writing or a document or even maybe even a picture or a graph. So all of those can be combined, excuse me, using that HAP method. So audience is obviously who's the audience for this. Purpose, what is the author's intended purpose? And then the last one is point of view. What is the author trying to say here? Is there a bias? Is it a Republican saying we shouldn't do this where a Democrat would say that they would? Just an example here, okay? My hard advice to you and to my AP students that I've taught in the past, I usually see students struggle with historical context with a document. So I would urge you to use 2 per paragraph. Now, AP says you only have to use 2 of these to get credit. I urge you to use 4. If you mess 1 or 2 up, you still have the 2 in the background. It also leads to your complexity point as well. Okay, so your historical context kind of sets the stage. Where are you at in history when this document's released? Really hard to make an argument out of it. Instead, you could say in document 6, Big Bertha's audience was blah, blah, blah. So that would get you that HAP point because you are saying this is the intended audience and this is what they think, okay? The purpose of Big Bertha stating this is blah, blah, blah. She was swayed by Congress because she didn't want to join the League of Nations. That's another argument for purpose. And the point of view, McKinley's point of view in not going into the war, the Spanish-American War, was because he had already experienced war with the Civil War at the Battle of Antietam. So again, a point of view expressing why someone does or does not want to do something will get you that argument point. Everyone with me? Okay. All right, so here's my strategy. So my strategy when I write this is very simple. I think I got someone who's asking me a question. Maybe I'm making that up. Sorry. Okay. So again, if you have any questions with this, just to reiterate while I have it up, if you have any questions, type it in the group chat, or if you want to shout it out to me, I'll absolutely answer it. So sometimes I lose track of that, so I'm just pulling that up. Sorry. So going back to my strategy when you get this in a second here, I'm going to show you a question that AP has asked in the past. Your job is to first and foremost rewrite that question. A lot of people get this wrong and they don't answer the entire question. The question could pertain: how does the government change economically and socially during the Great Migration? Right? That's just a sample question. But a lot of people, one of the biggest mistakes we get is that people only answer the social part, or only the other part of that question. They don't answer the full question. So please make sure that you answer the full question to get full credit. If you don't answer the full question in the thesis, your thesis is off, and probably the rest of your paper is off, and you're all jacked up. So please make sure you pay attention to that. That's why I make it my first strategy, because if you get the question wrong, the rest of your paper is going to follow along and be wrong too. Number two, I call it the brain barf. You're going to tell me every outside information that you know about that piece. Okay. You may get to the test and go, oh, I know everything about unions, and whatever you go ahead and think you're going to use for evidence piece, it turns out that that union piece is all in the documents, and now you have no outside information. Really spend about 5 to 10 minutes with this brain barf and tell me what you know, or at least organize it in that way. What I do is on my sheet of paper, I'll create 3 columns, and I'll show you that here in a second. And I try to write down 2 events, 2 people for each specific column. That way I have something to go on. Remember, if you include 2 sentences, it gets you that evidence. And you also want to include evidence in different paragraphs. Don't just put it in one lump sum, okay? The third part, then you go look at your documents, okay? And now you've probably gone ahead and organized your thesis. So now it's a matter of, this document goes with this argument, this document goes with that document, this document goes with that that document goes with this argument. Sorry. All right, so let me try that again. So this document goes with this argument, this document goes with this argument, and this document goes with this argument. Hard for me to talk. Okay, so the next one is you're going to write your thesis, which is your roadmap, and then we are going to finally get to writing our document. Okay, so by that time you have probably about 35 minutes or so. If you've planned well, I would say set your watch, do about 10 minutes to go ahead and plan. 10 minutes, 10 minutes to plan, so that you are organized. It will flow very easily. I was working with a student the other day on Wyzant, and you could tell she didn't plan, she didn't use any outside information, because she went right to the documents. Now, Matt, I'm panicking. I'm going to get to this test, and I'm panicking already. Oh my God, what do I do? So the first thing is calm down, okay? If you've been doing your work all along here, you're probably way ahead of the game anyway. Calm down. If you can't think of anything, then skip the brain barf, go right to the documents. Maybe that conjures up some more ideas, and then keep a separate sheet so that you do have that evidence, so that you can plug that in a little bit later. Okay. All right. Does everyone understand my plan of attack here? Does everyone understand how I teach this? Does this make sense to everyone? Okay. All right. All right. All right. All right, cool. All right, so we're gonna move on. All right, nice cat picture. They're the same, okay? All right, next one, I am gonna move on. So here's your question. Again, I am going to go ahead and rewrite my question. Word of note, how do you know it's a continuity change question? You literally see continuity and change in the question, okay? Another tip off, you'll see the word analyze. The word analyze means how and why, okay? How and why were major changes, blah, 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 blah. So what I'm gonna have you do is, I'm gonna stop talking, I'm gonna shut my big mouth up, and I'm gonna give you about 5 minutes to go ahead and rewrite your question, and then I'm gonna ask you to go ahead and frame an argument. What categories would this fit? What makes sense? Don't look at the documents. I'm not gonna skip to that, but take 5 minutes, rewrite the question and plan, and I will be back in 5. All right, everyone, how'd you feel? Thumbs up if you feel pretty good. Thumbs down. I guess you can't give me a thumbs down. All right. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this question. We got one thumbs up. Thank you, Emily, for making sure that I don't feel like I'm all by myself here. Okay. All right. So again, here's your question is a continuity question. So continuity and change question. So what we're looking at is 1865 to 1900. Here is how I rewrote the question. Maybe there we go. How and why did the lives of former slaves change and stay the same as a result of the Reconstruction era? So, as we think about African Americans and their situation as slaves, we know that it didn't really change from before the Civil War. Obviously, we had slaves, but realistically, after the Civil War, most African Americans stayed right where they were. Some will become exodusters. We do know that. So some of them will, or pardon me, most of them will stay right where they are, and they will stay in the South. Okay. And so realistically, you're probably going to focus on how most of the laws and most of the living situations for them did continue. However, there was a glimmer of hope for African Americans, usually by the radical Republicans. So that's how I would set up my paper. If you understand how to set up the paper, that's how that's how you would do that. So now I plan. So I'll talk about historical context before 1865 here in a moment. But when I set this up, I want to go lack of rights, obviously for African Americans, and I want to go laws that maybe government passed down that were against African Americans. Right. My counterpoint is that for that brief period in 1865 to 1877, we did have a Congress that was supportive of African Americans and did try to help them out. Now, were they obviously successful? No, they weren't. Andrew Jackson stepped in. He tried to veto a lot of stuff. General Grant will step in and he'll do some stuff. But then after that, it kind of gets muddled and pre-war South kind of settles back in, except for the name. And African-American slaves will then be known as freedmen, but they're working in a sharecropping situation, which is just as terrible. All right, so lack of rights. So here I want to set up what kind of rights did African Americans have in the obviously beginning or before the war. They were slaves. They did not have many rights. After the war, what kind of rights are set up? They're going to have Jim Crow laws will be set up. Plessy versus Ferguson will be set up under rights. So that Jim Crow era is set up and does go forth. Laws that are set up in government play, you could go ahead and come up with a few items that are there. And then your counterpoints, again, as I said, you would include, Reconstruction era, 1865 to 1900. The government did have radical Republicans. They had Grant who tried to stop the KKK. You did have other people try to go down, like the Freedmen's Bureau, try to support African Americans to get them an education. So they did get a leg up. Other people that you might include starting to step up would be W.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, that can go there. So you could even, instead of laws, I might put in there social changes. W.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, you could say African Americans held office that will be temporary, like Hiram Revels or Blanche K. Bruce. Okay, so those are the different points that I would make sure that I put in there for that. For my context, your first paragraph for me as a rule as a teacher, as an AP reader that I teach to my students is make sure that you get information in there before 1865 to 1900. What am I talking about? So you want to set the stage, and we'll talk about this a little bit later as we set up your first paragraph. In your first paragraph, you want to talk about what it was like for African Americans pre-1865. Obviously, there was the Civil War that's going on to go ahead and free the African Americans and ultimately get them their rights, which will come during Reconstruction with the 14th and 15th Amendments. But for the vast majority of African Americans, they were in a slave situation. They were on plantations or they were owned by a master. They had house slaves, they had field slaves that would have maniacal jobs that did not give rights. So you're setting the stage for that. So I would plan there a couple of what I always tell kids is try to get as much vocabulary in there as possible. You have the Barbados slave codes that were started up after these, I believe it was the Stone, no, pardon me, it was the Stono Rebellion, and that Stono Rebellion will cause the Barbados slave codes, and those slave codes set up the laws that did not allow African Americans to learn how to read or write. It did not let them have any rights, on and on and on. So it's setting up the stage before you get to the thesis. So you're already getting two big points in that first paragraph. You're getting your contextualization points and you're getting your thesis point. Does that make sense? All right, moving on up. So now now I'm going to look at the documents, and right here what I would look at is how can I put them back into these three categories: lack of rights, laws, or counterpoints. Okay, so my first one is act passed by the General Assembly of the state of North Carolina, 1831. Now, going back to the rules of AP this year, again, they want you to describe the document. Okay, so does this actually describe a change? Probably not. Okay, this is going to be pretty comparable to what it was like pre-1865, where African Americans don't have very many rights. We know that because it's North Carolina. You know anything in Reconstruction, especially the South, not many rights were given to African Americans post. So again, we're showing a similarity, a continuity. 1831, African Americans were not getting much support. After the Civil War, they're still not getting much support. It's very comparable to how they were treated, as unfair as it was. Okay. Again, stay away from other adjectives that describe your opinion. Everyone, right? Stay away from generalities, and just try to stick to facts as much as possible. We all do know that it was terrible, obviously, but try not to use terrible or unfair. Just say that there was no even playing field. I guess that's unfair, but don't use adjectives that show that there is some sort of opinion on your part. Okay, your whole document is your opinion. All right, so this one clearly I would put into the category of laws that did stay the same. Okay, going on. The freedmen of Edisto Island, South Carolina, petitioned to the president. Oops, excuse me. I am going to look at this document, and it's going to try to obtain their own land. What really happens? Do they get their own land pre-1865? No, they don't. They're living on their slave owner's land. They may be living with their slave owner in certain aspects. Okay. After 1865, we know it does change a little bit, but they're still living primarily on that land. Your counterpoint could be those exodusters that do move out to Kansas and that sort of thing. But for the most part, again, this is going to go back under lack of rights. You can't buy territory, okay, or you can't buy land that you want, okay? All right. This one, document 3, black codes. Obviously, we're talking about lack of rights there again. This is going to set up how a person can live, what they can or cannot have. So again, going with rights. Laws I put up there for formal laws. So this could go there. There's no one way to skin a cat, right? You can break up these arguments. You could talk about society, you could talk about laws, you could talk about rights. However you want to frame it in your thesis, just make sure it's an argument and you go with it. All right, I've got, what do I got? I got about 25 minutes left, so I'm going to kind of speed through these documents. All right, again, describe the document. This is a KKK of the Lincoln County, Georgia. You might describe the KKK and talk about their lack of respect for African Americans and their inability, or the KKK trying to stop African Americans from writing and obviously gaining rights post this Civil War. Okay, so again, this is another document. This could go under lack of rights. It could go under laws, the ability to not enforce the KKK, or it could even go on a counterpoint. So it can go in different categories. It could also talk about the social changes or lack thereof because they were enforced by the KKK. My last one, and this one's always very interesting, is the photographs. And this one relies on a lot more knowledge from previous times. So hopefully you've gotten through this with your teacher. And this picture shows African Americans. It shows a white woman out front, and the caption says Freedmen's School. This is part of the Freedmen's Bureau that was set up by Congress, specifically the Radical Republicans. It was passed in both houses of Congress, went to President Andrew Johnson, who subsequently went ahead and vetoed it. Both houses of Congress went back and they passed it. So this is your counterpoint. This is the change that they were trying to make, especially Radical Republicans, that can go into that paragraph, okay? So again, your goal here is you have to use 4 documents. That's what AP says. And you have to use the HAP method with 2, and you have to describe 4 documents. Again, I would urge you to use the HAP method with 4 of those documents. It makes it a whole lot easier. If you mess one up, if you panic and screw it up, at least you've got a couple more to back you up to make your argument even stronger. Okay, all right. So how do I do this now? So what I would do is I would go ahead and begin to write. Even before I began to write, I like to write my thesis. I like when students write their thesis first because it gives you a roadmap of what you're going to hit and gives you a second to really just think about how I'm going to fit my arguments. Excuse me. All right. So how I set up my first paragraph, I call it the hot method. This is where you get your points for your contextualization. So for your first 2 parts, I want historical context, describes the period before the time period in question, must relate to the topic. So in this term, I'm talking about African Americans previous to 1865 to ensure that I get the point. I want to talk about laws that you might know, rights that were taken away, how African Americans were treated incorrectly. You might even start with the triangular trade, bringing African Americans and having them sold at auction, which obviously was not good. You can even throw in documents like the Compromise of 1820, which is setting the standard for the United States going west, and obviously talking about the peculiar institution. By the way, that's another word that describes the slavery trade or the slavery, and it is counted as a vocabulary. But you want to create 2 strong sentences that show that you know a little bit about 1865 and before, okay? So 2 sentences, then you're going to have your transitionary sentence. How do you get to your thesis? After 1865, or between 1861 to 1865, the Civil War was being fought with the Emancipation Proclamation. President Lincoln went ahead and made slavery at the forefront of the argument as far as ethics in saving and preserving the Union by freeing those slaves. Then you hit me with your thesis, okay? So if you can do that, again, I told you at the top of our conversation tonight, that most people get about a 1.65 to a 1.75 on their document. By doing those 2 elements, look, I included the rubric on the right side. The first 2, the HO portions, or the 2 sentences of contextualization, get you the contextualization point, so you're at 1. And if you have a strong thesis that answers the question and sets up a roadmap, you've just earned your 2nd point. So you are by far ahead of most people that are going to take this test, okay? If you're in this class, obviously you know something about APUSH. I'm expecting that you probably have a stronger background. All right, so that's the rubric to the right, and then on the left, that is how I would set up my first paragraph. Is everyone good and understand what I'm talking about here? Emily Smith, do you have a question for me, or is that a thumbs up? I'm not sure which that is. I got a chat. I'm sorry. Here we go. All right, Emily, I got your question. My APUSH teacher taught us to do an intro paragraph followed by an entire context paragraph. Does that work as well? You could do that. My fear is that entire context paragraph is a lot. If you just do 2 sentences, Emily, you're going to be fine. Okay. I worry with the describe and the HAP method that you have to use later on, that's going to take away from that. And quite frankly, those two things are worth more points. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, I would use 2 sentences right at the beginning. You don't need more than that. And then you can go ahead, hit me with that transition and then your thesis, and you're well on your way. Okay, cool. All right. Anyone else have a question while I'm there? Just double checking. Okay, cool. I got everyone on silent. No one likes to talk to me. Sounds like normal. All right. All right. My next part, again, I brought this back up. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time in it, but this is my HAP or my HIP method. All right. Again, these are your reminders. You need to use at least 2 of these HIP or HAP methods, whichever one you want to call it. Okay. For sake of argument, I'm just going to refer to it as HAP. You need to use, when you use them, use 2 per paragraph. Obviously, there's 5 of them, 5 documents. I would use 2, 2, and 1, because you're usually only going to have 1 for your counter. If it doesn't shake out, just know you're good with 4. But again, I would use the HAP method for all 4 documents, just because, again, if you mess it up, you're good to go. A lot of people, in my last time I had this type of lecture, a lot of people thought that they had to include all 4 of the HAP methods. You don't. Okay, as long as you use audience and purpose and interchange it between the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, you're fine. Okay, you don't have to use all 4. I always tell kids, use 2 of them, and then when you use those 2, just roll with it. Okay, just use that strategy for the rest of your paragraphs, because what you're going to see really quickly when I start talking about the paragraphs is it's very formulaic, meaning you have a formula to how you write. And if you follow that format, it's going to get you the point. Okay, so again, use the 2 that you're strongest at. You know, you might see that one of the documents go, the audience for the Mississippi Black Codes were blah blah blah. The audience for the Freedmen's Bureau picture were Republicans in the North that were pushing for African American rights. So that's what you're going to do there. Okay. All right. So that again is the rehash of the HAP method, and this is how I set up my paragraphs. All right, so bear with me. On the left side is obviously my strategy. The right side is my rubric of how you get those points. So first off, you're going to have your main idea. Forgive me for my acronym. I use the I in main for idea. That's just the easiest way I could get it to float. But you want to include a strong introductory sentence, because that's going to follow your thesis. So when I write my thesis, that should be my first backup. It's like if I say, Matt likes to wear red. He wears red hat or red socks, red shoes. Those are my introductory paragraphs, right? You might go into, he wears Nike products that are red. Well, he wears the Alabama Crimson colors, right? So you're following those main ideas with a strong sentence that supports your thesis. After that, you can do one of 2 things. You can either describe a document that proves your point with your main topic, or you can give me evidence. Either or way is fine. Okay, so excuse me. So give me that evidence point, and show off. Use key vocabulary there. I can't tell you how many times people try to sit there and say the Declaration of Independence. If I turn around and I told you guys I'm a 37-year-old man, Ariana Grande was a pop star in the 2010s, you would go, Mr. Tiffy, I know that. That's okay. You don't have to give me that definition. Same way with the with U.S. history. When you write the Declaration of Independence, you're good. We know what you're talking about. You don't have to describe that. It was written by, you know, Thomas Jefferson and a couple other people, including Ben Franklin, on and on and on. Say the vocabulary point and go. Okay. All right. So details. I have 2 daughters. That's why I know about Ariana Grande, in case you're wondering. Details that support this. So again, you're going to include your evidence, your points. Describe your document. Okay. Tell me a little bit more about your document. Why were the Mississippi Black Codes passed? Because there were white men that were coming back into power that wanted to show their dominance and to ensure that they were in power and not this Republican Party, which was supported by African Americans. Okay, so that's my description. And then I'm going to use that HAP method right away. Okay, don't quote. You will get 0 points for quoting. Quoting is an absolute no-go. In fact, for my students where I teach, if they use a quote, I actually take points away, because it's just a waste of time. You're not getting anything through. A lot of teachers or professors think that you're rehashing exactly what it says, and they kind of just write you off. Okay. Most people, when they read your documents, are taking about 2 to 3 minutes to read. because they have so many. I think I grade about 750 documents in a week. So I'm going through this and I'm checking. If I see a quote, I'm going, this person may not know, and it's kind of a red alert for me. Okay, so explain, and then I'll answer. Go ahead, write your question if you want, and then I'll answer that in a second. So I need to have some sort of analysis. So what has happened from that document? So my question I always ask is, so what? Why is this document important? And then go into your next document. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Okay, so it should be your main idea, your document, your hat, where you describe it, your hat method, your evidence, and then you can do that for the next document. So, and then you keep on going that way. Someone had a question. I thought it was Anaya. Did you have a question? No, I thought I saw your hand go up. Okay. I'm going to keep on going then, unless you, if you have a question, Anaya, please write it in the chat and I'll get to it. Okay, and then to get that unicorn point, after you've used 2 documents, don't use more than 2 documents per paragraph. It's not going to help you out to do that. You want to spread them out so that you have a viable argument. Okay, Anaya said, should we put the document number in parentheses after we describe the document? Yeah, or what I teach students is document number 2. Let's go back and look at the evidence real quick so I can give you an evidence. Document number 4, referring to the KKK of Lincoln County. That's perfect. If you introduce using the document in document 2, blah, 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 that's fine. You don't necessarily have to put it in parentheses. That's really nice. That does help. You know, some people prefer to do it that way. If you're fine with that, that's fine too. But I prefer to introduce a document. Document number 4, the KKK of Lincoln County in Georgia, we're trying to get their rights back and take those away from African Americans who were voting for Republican, right? Does that make sense, Anaya? Are you with me? That's a great question, by the way. Okay, cool. All right. So going on down, excuse me. So the last part of this, I'm just checking time to make sure I have a tendency to ramble. The last part of this is your analyze point. This is that magical unicorn, right? My daughter's 6 years old and she's all into unicorns, and that's why I call it the unicorn point, because it's all magical. Because if someone gets it, people go, "Wow, look at this!" All right. So that analysis point is, so what? You've written this wonderful argument about the laws that have stayed the same. So what? How does that stay the same? How does that bleed into political or economic histories? Does that make sense what I'm saying? So if I'm talking about these social laws that are going on, or going back to that, going back to document, I think it was document 3 with the black codes, you know, how does that bleed into political or economic? African Americans could not join unions because they would have been seen as being equal. Okay, so therefore they were not offered union jobs. They were pushed into sharecropping jobs so that the land was still farmed, right? So I'm taking that social argument and I'm either putting it in a political, well, I just did, it said unions were illegal for them, or I'm putting that into an economic argument where we see that there is bleeding into each of those categories. Okay, so that is going to separate you and make your argument even stronger. And you're going to do it at the end of each paragraph, and then you're going to do it at the end of your actual document. So don't shy away from it. We love seeing that. That's obviously going to get you more points at the end. Okay, but that's what we're looking for that. Okay. Does anyone have any questions here with the paragraph setup? If you're good, give me a thumbs up. I just want to make sure. Mina, Emily, thank you. Anaya. Okay. All right. Cool. Kaori, I hope I'm saying that right. All right. So I'm going to move on. So my last paragraph, I use something called the stops strategy. Okay. At the beginning of this document, that beginning of our talk, excuse me, I said there are 2 places where you can write your thesis. Your thesis can be in your first paragraph, in your last sentence, or in your first sentence of your last paragraph. I stress that you write them in both. And the reason is you may augment your argument in one where it's kind of weaker at the beginning and stronger at the end. Um, and it helps a reader. Again, as I said, we're reading about 700 to 750 documents. As much as we want to say we're with it, and we're reading these about 2 to 3 minutes at a time. It just kind of, oh yeah, there it is. Duh. Okay, makes sense. Got it. Okay, so always, you can't say your thesis enough. I would make sure the rules say you have to say it in those 2 spots. So I would make sure that you're doing that. Ayush, I'll come back to your question in a second. Okay, buddy. All right. The other part of this is, where does this bleed to? What are the other periods that this can go? Again, so what? What changes? African Americans will go through, from 1865 to 1900, African Americans will be subjugated to some terrible situations. That doesn't change until the 1950s and 1960s with, Brown v. Board of Education, or Emmett Till, or the Montgomery bus boycotts. So there's a few other parts. We want to show longevity, that this is still an issue at this point later on. Okay, so we don't just want to stick here. This is your chance to show off, hey, look, I know that this has been an issue for almost close to 100 years after the Civil War, and these are some of the issues that we still see, and this is why. Okay. All right, I'm going back to the questions. Ayush, do we have to mention any documents in the I portion of the document? No, that's just your main idea. Okay, so Ayush, you're just going to go ahead and write your topic sentence, and then don't ever write your documents right away. It's like if I came right up to you and I had a conversation, I said, did you see that documentary on the Bulls, right? And you're like, whoa, wait, back up. What? I don't even know what you're talking about, right? So to properly have that conversation, I'm going to say, hey, you a basketball fan? I was a fan of the Bulls when I was a kid, and this documentary that I'm watching really falls in line. Does that make sense, Ayush? Okay. Let me know what you think there. Karina, does outside evidence count as using a specific vocabulary word that wasn't in the documents? For example, if there's a document talking about the Gilded Age and corruption, and you bring up the robber barons, does that count as outside information? Great question. So if that document, let me go back to the document. If the document is talking about, obviously, let me go to a better one here. So if the document is talking about the KKK, right, and that's the evidence, or that's in your evidence, you write down, when you're doing your brain bar, you write KKK. That KK, because it's stated in a document, can only be used as document points. So if you use it in your evidence, it does not count for any points. So you have to come up with something else. You may use the White League, which was another racist group that was down in the South. Does that make sense, Karina? Are you okay with that? Okay. All right. Karina, you're on the other page. Sorry, I'm getting to it. Cool. Thank you, Karina. Great question. I like that question a lot. I get that a lot. All right. Do we bring outside, Anaya says, do we bring outside evidence with vocab and historical context? Do we bring outside evidence? Yeah, you can. So historical context counts as your HAT method. You can, but they want to see a little bit of a separation of it. So you'll have your introductory sentence, you'll have your outside information, and then you have your historical context that relates to your document. So there's a little bit of a breakup. I hope that makes sense. Anaya, does that make sense for me, or for you? Excuse me. Apparently at this point in the night, nothing makes sense to me. All right. Anaya, did that make sense? I'm sorry, I don't know if you gave me a thumbs up. I was on the other slide there. All right, kind of, how would you bring in outside evidence? So if I'm talking about, let's use this document, the KKK. The KKK was a group socially that was motivated to control African Americans and prevent them from gaining their rights. Another group of this would be the White League, that also sought to prevent African Americans from gaining their rights. The KKK was started post-Civil War, so I'm describing the KKK, right, to prevent Northerners, Republicans, and scalawags from supporting African Americans. And then I would go into my HAT methods, or that would be my HAT method because it's a historical context. Does that make sense, Anaya? Are you with me now? Okay, perfect. All right. So that's where we're at. All right, let's go to the next one. Outside of that, I guess I'm at the end here. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, let me do this. I'm just going to go a rundown of documents, or I'm sorry, of time periods that you should be studying. My recommendation tonight, hopefully you have done your due diligence and you've been studying along here. I'm just going to very quickly run down the different time periods that AP is going to pull from. If you bear with me 1 second, I'll tell you the different periods and their years. That way, if you have a weakness, I highly, highly, highly stress that you go back tonight. Don't spend a ton of time. I only urge you to spend about another hour or so researching. But these are your different periods. So period 1 and period 2 are your colonization area. I would know a little bit about that, just the different powers that are coming in, only because if the question is on the 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War, you have a little bit of that historical context that's back there. Okay, so starting with period 3 is 1754 to 1800. That is your 7 Years' War. That is the causes of the Declaration of Independence. That is the obviously the War for Independence, the American Revolution. And then that bleeds into the early government. So George Washington, John Adams. So period 4 will be 1800 to 1848. That will be the Jeffersonian Republicans or Democrats, whichever you wish. You have the era of good feelings in there. You have the War of 1812. You have Second Great Awakening, which I would make sure you're studying. That's a big portion that has historically been a favorite of AP. Then 1840s. When you think 1840s, you should automatically think Manifest Destiny, okay? James K. Polk should be there. Mexican-American War. You got 5440 or Fight in our northern border of Washington. 1848 to 1844 to 1877. So again, this kind of bleeds into a little bit of Manifest Destiny. It goes into antebellum. Obviously, with Manifest Destiny, that opens up the can of worms that'll never be ended about slavery and how the country's going to go until we obviously have the Civil War. So 1844 to 1877, this is usually going to be right around Manifest Destiny, antebellum period, or period before the Civil War, or before the war if you're speaking in Latin, the Civil War, and then obviously Reconstruction. The next period is period 6, 1865 to 1898. This is kind of like the Gilded Age, Reconstruction, economics part here, and also the social parts that will limit rights for especially African Americans. And this will take you all the way up until 1898. Obviously, our imperialism, our Spanish-American War. Period 7, this is your last period, 1890 to 1945. This is imperialism. This is going to be the progressives, the populists. I'm sorry, the populists would be in period 6. So 1890 would be the progressives. You would have World War I. You would have 1920, the return to normalcy with Harding. You would have 1930s would be the Great Depression. I skipped 1920s. 1920s would be like the Jazz Age, that sort of thing. 1930s is obviously the Great Depression and the New Deal. And then obviously the last 2 terms for FDR is going to be World War II. Okay, so that's just a quick rundown. Some of the main topics that are there. Again, when you do have this test, you have 3 ways that you can pop your answers in there. You can go ahead and write your answers. Just word of note, if you choose that method, make sure that you're legible. If you are not legible, we will throw that test out. It will not be graded. We will try our hardest to read it, but if it's totally ineligible, you will not be graded. It will go back as a 0. No one wants that. Also, word of note, if you do write it, go ahead, just draw a line through. Rules say that if there's a line through it, just one little simple line, that it does not count. Okay, so don't sit there and erase. Just draw a line and go. And then what the other way is you can copy and paste. You write your essay on that Microsoft Word or Notes or whatever platform that you can write, copy, paste, pop it in there, or you can save it to your computer and upload it. If you have other questions, I'm more than willing to sit around for a few minutes, answer all your questions. But I do wish each and every one of you guys good luck. One more thing that I'll say is if there is a situation where you don't take the test tomorrow or your test does not get uploaded as I described the problems that were before, I am around. I will help out. I've got a couple other people that I am helping my students, but I will absolutely help you out if you're looking for someone to kind of give you some extra time so that you're ready for the June test. So just look me up on Wiseend. I am there. Shameless plug. And please, good luck to you guys. I hope you all do well. But if you do have any questions, I'm here. You can ask me a question. I can help you out, okay? Otherwise, good night. Good luck. 3 possible timelines. I'm not sure, Ayush, what you're talking about with the 3 possible timelines. Are you talking about the 3 different questions? Or the 3 different ways that you can submit your test? Help me out, Ayush, and I can answer your question. Oh, time periods they can test. They will test from period 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so those are the 3 periods. So starting with 1754, the 7 Years' War, or French and Indian War, as we call it in the United States, all the way up to 1945. Does that help? Okay. All right. So if you have more questions, I will be the last to sign out. But if you are good to go, I am good to go. Best of luck to all of you, and we will roll on. Thanks for your attention, guys. Yeah, so Karina, your question, if the test doesn't submit for some odd reason, I would save and copy that just in case AP wants you to come back. But more than likely, they will send you a form. Was it submitted incorrectly? I would fill that form out. I would email your AP coordinator at your school. It's one of our counselors at the school. Maybe even email your AP teacher. And there'll be a form. You'll fill that out and email your AP counselor or your coordinator, and they will have you take the test probably in June again. It'll obviously be a different topic as well. So just so you know. Okay, good luck, Karina. You're welcome. Anyone else? Questions? Give another minute here before I sign off, unless you guys have something else. Ayush, let me know how you do. All right, buddy. Best of luck.
Thank you. See you.
Yep. Mina, Fengel, you guys have any questions? Are you guys okay? You're welcome. No problem, Mina. Good luck. Fengel, are you okay, buddy? All right, Fengel, best of luck. I'm going to sign out. Good night. Good luck.